Unless you live in Flint, Michigan's 5th Ward, you may not have heard of Wantwas Davis. Voters in the 5th Ward recently elected him as their representative on the Flint City Council. But even if you follow local media, there's something about him you might not have learned until after the election. Davis is a convicted murderer. His criminal past wasn't revealed in local television and newspaper reports before the election, including this article in the Flint Journal titled, "Everything You Need to Know About the 5th Ward Flint City Council Race." Well, maybe not everything. So, how did the Michigan media miss this important fact? And is this the inevitable result of cutbacks in local newsrooms around the country? Joining us now from East Lansing, Michigan, Vincent Duffy, news director at Michigan Radio and chairman of the Radio Television Digital News Foundation. And here in Washington, Richard Prince, who covers news about journalists of color in his online column, Journalisms, at the Maynard Institute for Journalism Education. So, you know, as journalists, I think we're used to politicians becoming convicted felons after they get elected. So this is kind of an unusual thing. Vince, you wrote about this for the RTDNA newsletter. What happened here?
Well, this was really a problem of the newspaper to begin with. They just didn't cover it. They had a questionnaire that Wantwas Davis filled out and sent it in, and that was the basis of their Everything You Need to Know article that they had. And after Mr. Davis was elected, the day after, they published a story that told the voters throughout Flint that, in fact, he was also a convicted killer, something that the voters might have wanted to know, perhaps before the election.
You know, what was interesting to me about this is you noticed that his conviction was in his Google results, right? The first page. Why didn't they just at least Google his name?
I don't know. I mean, the publisher of the the editor of the newspaper, Marjorie Raymer, apologized in an article and said that they didn't do a good job, which is a bit of an understatement. This wasn't heavy investigative work to figure out that he had this conviction and had done prison time. If you Google his name, the lawsuit comes up right away in Google. There was also a debate that he participated in where the debate moderator introduced him and included this material in his biography. And there was a reporter from the Flint Journal sitting in the audience at the debate, and they still didn't pick up on it then.
Wow. So, Richard, you know that the story has a racial component because there's apparently at least one website that has said that blamed black voters for electing two black men who have criminal records.
Right.
But if the local media didn't really report on this, how can you blame the voters?
You can't blame the voters. As a matter of fact, the voters don't really blame the newspaper because they already knew about this, as Vince pointed out. I think this is good that this segment is coming up right after our segment about Martin Bashir, because what's important here is not the apology, but what are you going to do about it? And I think this is a fascinating story. The voters elected somebody who had a criminal record. They understood the criminal record. In fact, if you look at the comments on some of the stories, some of them thought this was a good thing because he would be able to relate to his constituents better that way.
Right. Well, now, Vince, they didn't just make a mistake with Wantwas Davis. There was another felon who was elected, and there were two other people who had bankruptcies who were elected who also weren't covered. Does it say something about the city that so many officials with legal problems are getting elected, and are journalists making too much of this?
You know, I don't know what it says about the city. I mean, the city is under an emergency manager because of financial problems, so the state really has control of it. And at the moment, city council doesn't have a whole lot of power, and so that may have diminished the number of people that wanted to run for those offices. But I do think that it's a symptom on the newspaper side and on all the local media side of what's happening at many small markets and medium markets around the country, where you have staff cuts at the newspaper and staff cuts at the broadcasting outlets, and reporters that are being asked to do a lot more these days than just report the news. At newspapers, they're putting up websites. They're responsible now for taking the photographs. They have to be on Twitter. They have to be on Facebook. There's a lot that smaller newsrooms are being asked to do, and my concern is that this is a symptom of the news that's falling through the cracks. Reporters are working very fast, and corners are being cut. And in this case, clearly, they didn't even bother to Google the candidates that were running for city council.
Now, Richard, I wonder, does a situation like this present an opportunity for another news outlet? I mean, isn't this the kind of thing that hyper-local sites like AOL Patch were created to address in the first place?
Yeah, but I think that one of the other problems, aside from the cutback in staff, is the cutback in the experience level of the staff. And the story that I was talking about that I think would be fascinating is why is the black community electing people like this, as that racist website pointed out? We had a situation here in Washington, D.C., where Marion Barry was elected again after his felony. But apparently, this is not a concern. This is actually an asset to people who say, we've got problems in our black community, and Flint is a majority black city, and why is this happening? what is going through the voters' minds. I think that would be a tremendous service, not only to the people of Flint, Michigan, who need to be introduced and reintroduced to the people in the wider circulation area, but to those around the country who have picked up on the story.
Great. Well, thanks very much for joining us, Vincent Duffy, Richard Prince. We really appreciate having you here.
Thank you.